Is this the future of agriculture? Vegetables and lettuce heads stacked on several floors, artificially lit. Fully automatic breeding, protected from drought, frost and storm. This is no future vision, but already reality in Japan.
In this system, we can produce food under optimum conditions with high nutrient content and good taste all year round. That's the big difference to working in the field.
Field work in Brandenburg, wrapped in thick clouds of dust, the consequences of the drought. Without massive artificial irrigation, the harvest would be completely lost. Will our fields soon collapse?
Under the current conditions, I'd have to recommend my children to find another job.
Devastating droughts here, severe flooding elsewhere. Food production is in danger worldwide, with new famines impending. Researchers all over the world are looking for solutions. A normal harvesting operation in Japan. The workers are dressed in protective suits, hygienically packed. The environment is also clinically clean. These lettuce heads grow without soil, free of pesticides. The room temperature always remains the same.
I find it very pleasant that I can always work indoors regardless of the weather, better than in a rice field.
Vertical farming is the name of this method from Japan that's spread in Kyoto. The roots thrive in a liquid nutrient solution without topsoil, but with the same natural ingredients such as sodium and potassium. There are lighting lamps with similar color temperatures to sunlight. Solar collectors and the green facade show that progress is at home here. The University of Chiba in Japan. In this futuristic-looking greenhouse, experiments are being carried out with vertical vegetable cultivation. Professor Toyoki Kozai invented this method in the 1970s already. At that time, he still had problems with the right light and high electricity costs. The breakthrough came with LED technology.
I originally wanted to help farmers who own little land. Vertical agriculture makes it possible to produce 100 times the annual harvest on a single plot of land, as with conventional farming. It's therefore worth investing in such vegetable factories. These plants can be set up anywhere. It's an important step towards sustainable agriculture. There are no losses during harvesting, and we use less energy for transport. Productivity and economic efficiency can be increased even further with the latest technology.
This method is mainly used for vegetables and lettuce heads. Research into staple foods such as cereals or potatoes hasn't reached that stage yet.
After the Fukushima catastrophe, interest in these new greenhouses is particularly high in Japan, as it is possible to produce all year round here, regardless of external influences. Thanks to our method, the farmers have a stable production without damage from insects or worms. This is one of the reasons why this method is sustainable. And you can run these vegetable factories in the middle of the city and produce them locally as needed.
The opposite, farming out in the field. Once again, the farmers lack water, lots of water, and it is much too hot. Temperatures of up to 40 degrees centigrade let the soil dry out, up to 2 meters deep. In large parts of Germany, drought prevailed in the summer. The consequence were losses or even total destruction of the harvest with high financial detriment. Farmer Hans-Heinrich Grünhagen in Brandenburg is one of the suffering farmers. He grows potatoes and corn. His farm is situated in an area with light, dry soils. Nothing would grow on his farm without the help of expensive irrigation systems. The water is pumped deep from underground, and experts predict that even more extreme dry periods will come.
If you look at the ground here, there's no humidity. No plant can live here. That's why there's nothing to be found. There are 2 small potatoes on it, here and a few more, but they need water. We have a very dry year this year, just like last year. It just rained half of what would have been normal at this time of year. These soils were so dry from last year already that the little rain we had in the last days is not enough to feed the plants.
But how can the problems of the farmers be solved? How can the food supply of the future be ensured? The University of Wageningen in the Netherlands is working on this. At the renowned agricultural university, scientists are working to finally defeat hunger in the 21st century with new ideas and methods. They assume that in 30 years' time, twice as much food as today will have to be produced. But the conditions for this have worsened. In order to not exacerbate the climate crisis, the area available for food crops must not be increased. New methods are therefore needed to produce food in the future. Ernst van den Ende heads the Department of Plant Sciences. The situation is very problematic for him.
So if we change nothing and we keep on consuming the way we are doing, and if we don't optimize the way we produce our food, then for the next 40 years we will need to produce as much food as we did over the last 8,000 years. And I think that gives really a good impression how big the challenge is to feed the world in 2050.
With its huge greenhouses, the Netherlands is the second largest food exporter in the world. And they watch their resources. Vegetable growers need much less water to grow tomatoes than anywhere else, thanks to new irrigation techniques.
Our research is focusing on to produce more food, but at the same time to do it with less inputs. So we need to produce more nutritious food, more safe food. And this challenge, more with less and better, is really the overarching theme of our research programs.
Still, everyday life mostly looks like in Almeria, Spain. Under this sea of plastic tarpaulins lies Europe's largest vegetable garden, artificially irrigated, growing for export. Millions of tons of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers and other varieties go mostly to Germany from here. But intensive cultivation has its price. Pesticides and fertilizers contribute to the fact that hardly anything grows here outside the greenhouses. And the Spanish vegetable farmers are running out of water. The entire area is drying up. The situation in Africa is even more extreme, especially south of the Sahara. One reason is the rise in weather catastrophes. The poor and hungry hardly stand a chance to free themselves from their misery, complains Secretary General of Welthungerhilfe, a German aid association.
Since 2014, the number of hungry people has risen again. At the moment, there are 821 million. And there are about 30 million people suffering from hunger due to direct consequences of climate change.
Die Menschen sind ganz persönlich, ganz akut selber betroffen.
The people are acutely affected because storms hit the country, which had previously been completely unknown. And that's a sign of the destructive power that this changing climate can trigger, and how the people in the countries in which we work are at the mercy of this force.
Disasters, droughts and floods not only destroy the habitat of the inhabitants, but also valuable cultivated areas for agriculture. Brandenburg farmer Grünhagen can still solve his problems with drought with technical aid supported by the EU. Nevertheless, he is pessimistic about his future.
We can only continue farming here with irrigation and are no longer competitive worldwide. The potatoes that we water are needed here in the region. That's a market with which we can still compete.
Back to Japan, to the company Spread in Kyoto, headquarters for the new world of agriculture. Spread is currently the world's largest vertical production farm. An employee of the company on her way to work. Her clothes don't look like farm work clothes. The hygiene regulations are strict, almost like in an operating theatre. Germ buds must not enter production from outside, because the food should be clean and safe. In this closed, sterile environment, the plants grow without the use of pesticides and fertilizers. More than 50,000 lettuce heads leave the factory every day. Only the packaging of lettuce takes place in this hall. In others, different kinds of vegetables grow, including mushrooms and exotic herbs. The offer is large. Out of fear of germs in the water, people here say, please do not wash, otherwise the vegetables will get dirty. A further advantage of this kind of indoor farming is that the plants thrive on several levels, one above the other, so they require little valuable area. And in some halls, the cultivation is already fully automatic. Shinji Inada founded the factory 15 years ago.
At that time, climate change or the explosion of the world population were not a big issue. There was also no market for vegetables from the factory. But now we are making good profits. I don't think that factories will completely replace conventional farming, but I think that our way of farming will play a central role in 20, 30 years. We also want to transfer the technology to poor countries so that they can produce their own food.
Due to the short distances to the supermarkets and restaurants, the goods don't spoil during transport, unlike traditional supply chains. Almost all Japanese supermarkets receive food from artificial farms. Japan is a leader in this technology, and there are already 200 such facilities. The customers like to buy such lettuce heads, even if they are a little more expensive and are packed in plastic on the shelf. Especially since the catastrophe of Fukushima, consumers have been looking for safe food.
I'm glad everything's so clean, and I can use the lettuce right away without having to wash it first.
The smiled-at beginnings of artificial vegetable production have turned into a profitable business within 15 years. On the other hand, traditional agriculture in Japan is also in a deep crisis. We are heading for the rice fields outside Kyoto. Rice cultivation includes the use of pesticides, a necessary aid for the farmers to survive. Rice, which is sacred to many Japanese, is heavily subsidized in Japan, and the market is largely closed off by high tariffs. Rice imports are seen as an attack on a cultural heritage. But the areas under cultivation are dwindling. The average size of a Japanese farm is just 1.8 hectares. That's only enough as a sideline. That's why there is hardly any new blood. The average age of the farmers is 66 years. They form cooperatives in many places in order to be able to operate more effectively. The increase in natural disasters is also a problem for them. This need has made farmer Akira Iijima inventive. This is my aquaponics system, he proudly explains. In his small greenhouse, he tries a new form of agriculture, aquaponic. Fish are bred in large tanks. Akira Iijima has 250 sturgeons in his facility.
で、 こ
The fish's excrements are pumped off and used as fertilizer for various types of vegetables. The water cleaned from the plants is returned to the fish tanks. From rice farmer to modern aquaponic farmer, almost all kinds of vegetables thrive here all year round and independent of climate changes. His greenhouse has even withstood an earthquake. The farmers in his neighborhood had big problems this year. It rained too much and the plants didn't get enough sun. Akira Iijima, on the other hand, can carry his harvest to the market and dreams of an even bigger plant. Just like the one standing in Berlin in the Schöneberg district, in the courtyard of an old industrial area. Greenhouses for growing vegetables in the middle of the city. Groups of visitors from all over the world crowd here to have the operators explain the special features to them. This is also an aquaponic farm, but on a grand scale. The current product, the capital basil, grown by the excretions of fish bred in these tanks. The fish that is sold on Berlin's markets is of course called capital perch.
We want to produce where there is consumption, to ensure we don't have long transport chains, long cooling chains, and that we simply have a better CO2 balance. I think our fish, the capital perch, is the freshest fish you can buy here in Berlin.
The principle is as simple as it's old. The water contaminated by the fish is poured over the plants as fertilizer. It was used in this way in China and by the Maya centuries ago. The plants grow faster on shelves or raised beds in these rooms than in a natural environment. The young entrepreneurs produce 9,500 basil pots per week for a supermarket chain. It won't take long before the construction costs of 1.4 million euros have been recouped. 7.7 billion people currently live on our planet. In just 30 years it will be 11 billion, and more are leaving the rural regions. According to a United Nations study, a good 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities by 2050. So much more needs to be built, especially in Asia. There, the megacities already extend over huge areas that agriculture lacks. So more plants, more green in the cities. A special challenge also for the urban planners, because the inhabitants of the megacities do not only have to be supplied with living space, water and energy, but where is there still room for the cultivation of food? Düsseldorf architect Christoph Ingenhofen and his staff are planning huge residential and office complexes in almost all megacities in the world and want to make them worth living in.
In cities, we are dealing with overheating. Cities are significantly warmer and hotter than the surrounding countryside. We are dealing with cities that are not only densely populated, so to speak, but also sealed. We have little contact between the environment and the soil. This has negative consequences, because infiltration, displacement and distribution of this problem is no longer possible. This is where greening, green architecture and so on play an important role.
This residential and office complex in Singapore, as high as the Berlin television tower, is an example of the work of the Düsseldorf architects. 20,000 people live and work here, a small town in a single building complex. In the middle of it is a kind of green heart. 350 different plant species are to provide better air and a better climate.
This is certainly not the solution for normal rural Central European areas, but it is the solution for highly dense locations. If you are planning green areas and can also use them for food production at the same time, then you have two effects. You have the shading effect, you have the desettlement effect, you have the whole topic of oxygen production. You have all the advantages of the plant itself and can generate an additional one, and thus save CO2, because transport routes are saved.
So green spaces are not just for recreation. Agricultural businesses in high-rise buildings or on roofs next to huge office and residential towers?
I wouldn't smile at that, although of course it seems bizarre, because I simply believe that in Central Europe one can hardly imagine the density, intensity and difficulty of many of these cities in the next 50 years. What we have to do now is to reach our goals in a quality that allows the people there to lead a healthy life permanently.
What still sounds like dreams of the future to us is already reality in Asia. But even in Europe, more and more people are moving to the cities, and the transport routes for food are becoming longer. We are in the center of Tokyo. The Ginza is the main shopping street of the metropolis of millions, seat of large Japanese corporations and long-established institutions. In the middle of it, a rice field on the roof of a high-rise building. A sake brewery grows the raw material for its rice wine here. In Japan, sake is not just an alcoholic drink, it's an indispensable part of the country's culture, as is rice. For this brewery, sake and rice therefore belong right in the heart of Tokyo. At the same time, it's an experimental field for new varieties. The roof of a high-rise building as agricultural land.
In the beginning, they didn't take us seriously. They said that there wouldn't be any rice growing here, as it's much too bright here at night and much too hot on the roof. But we have had good experiences and are harvesting more and more. The rice grows well here. I think it's right that people in Japan are looking for different ways to grow rice and vegetables. It's a challenge, and rice is part of our tradition.
The brewery makes 50 bottles of sake per season from its small rice field on the roof. Just a few blocks away is another high-rise building. On the 13th floor of a normal office complex, a consulting firm has set up a small farm on one floor. Another example of how rural life can come to the city. The employees here should not only stroke the animals for their own relaxation, the company also wants its employees to learn something about agriculture, to get a feeling for nature in the middle of the megacity Tokyo. One office worker is said to have already decided to quit his job in order to become a farmer. The venerable Gropius building in the center of Berlin. Right next to the entrance hall of the museum is a restaurant. Illuminated glass cabinets arouse the curiosity of visitors. Inside grow herbs and lettuce heads. An Israeli startup based in Berlin has installed these plant cabinets in some of the city's restaurants and in the shops of a supermarket chain. They function similarly to the plant factories in Japan and ensure that the herbs are brought fresh to the table. 50 such mini greenhouses are located in Berlin alone. About 200 are already distributed in Europe. 2 square meter area in the plant cabinet corresponds to 250 square meters of regular farmland. The restaurant manager comes from Israel. These investments are worthwhile for her, even if the next market with fresh goods is not far away.
We actually harvest it very shortly before eating, before cooking. So the plants remain very strong in taste and very crispy. And you can't get this richness of taste and crispness on the normal market.
And less food is wasted in the kitchen because you only take what is really needed for the dishes.
We are harvesting from our farms 2 or 3 times a week. We don't have to wash it because it doesn't have any dirt. it has just water and roots, so it's perfect for the cook and also for the guests. This is, for example, is crystal lettuce. First of all, it's lettuce that is very hard to get in the market. So you can see that it's super crispy, and the fact that you are harvesting it and putting it straight into the plate, it makes a huge difference. But the other thing, and I think this is the most important one, is that we have access to flavors and to plants that you cannot get anywhere. For example, this one is mustard, and it's something that you cannot get in the market. It tastes really like mustard. It's like it's sharp and spicy. Another thing, for example, that you cannot get and we have access to is wasabi. It tastes like the real Japanese thing, like the wasabi powder, but it's fresh.
Sure, this kind of special preparation is rather for the pleasure of a metropolitan minority. These greenhouses in Germany are certainly not intended for mass production yet. The lettuce does not have to be transported far until it reaches the table. Plants from the factory grown under artificial sunlight, without soil and with little water. An important step for the food of the future and a challenge for conventional agriculture.
We work with nature. If you look around here, larks are singing, insects are flying. That doesn't happen in these facilities. I don't think that's what you want in the future. It's not nature. It's an artificial product. I just can't imagine it. It has nothing more to do with my ethos as a farmer. For me, a farmer needs an area where something grows, an area that I can take care of my plants. Being a traditional farmer, my ethos forbids me to perform artificial farming.
But do we have a choice? Classic agriculture alone will not be able to supply the growing world population for long without the help of the laboratory, with plants that develop in a controlled way without the use of fertilizers and pesticides and with little water.
We will soon be populated by 10 or even 11 billion people, and there will be a city size that we still can't really grasp. At the moment, it's almost considered progress if we manage the amount at all. To build this is a key technology of the 21st century, without which survival on this planet will not take place.
What do you want? Do you want to produce in such a way that you have suboptimal yields and you need to use a bigger surface, and that means that you have to destroy nature? Or you want to have your optimal yields per square meter? So my opinion is that we use our agricultural fields in such a way that we optimize the growth in order to save the environment.
Research is still in its infancy, but vertical agriculture will have to conquer cities all over the world in a few decades. Safe, clean and sustainable. Otherwise, food can really become scarce. Europe's agriculture, a disaster for the environment in many places. The landscape, climate and biodiversity suffer. But the EU continues to pump huge sums of money into an obviously ill system.
Organic agriculture must be highly awarded and not, so to speak, the overexploitation of nature.
But an environmentally friendly agricultural policy is not in sight. Why? Is it due to the influence of powerful interest groups?
To call me a lobbyist is a vicious insinuation.
The EU billions are now being redistributed. The chance for a new, more environmentally friendly agricultural policy? Fields for as far as the eye can see. This is the realm of Urban Jülich. He is the managing director of one of the largest agricultural enterprises in Germany, the Bördegrün Company, 2,600 hectares. an agro-factory trimmed for efficiency and mass production. Jülich is a successful large-scale farmer. And yet, he does not seem to be really happy.
It has nothing to do anymore with the agriculture which we find in fairy tale books. We're highly technological, we're incredibly productive, and the demands are growing all the time.
The company produces 10,000 tons of potatoes per year for a French fries manufacturer in northern Germany. Jülich only grows one variety. For the right French fries length, all potatoes should have the same size. The farm uses fertilizers and pesticides to keep yields high, just like all conventional farmers. Thanks to its huge cultivation area, farmer Jülich receives 700,000 euros a year in subsidies from the EU to make sure he can assert himself on the world market.
Meanwhile, 65% of the potatoes grown are processed and end up in finished products. In other words, we're actually competing with frozen French fries from America. We have a global market.
With its billions, the EU is promoting the emergence of such agro-giants. This is because the money is distributed by area, not by ecological criteria. This farm stands for the exact opposite. Organic farmer Andreas Hatzel works on just 200 hectares according to the rules of the Bioland label. The family business east of Munich also cultivates potatoes. 20 different varieties without the use of artificial fertilizers and chemical pesticides.
I've learned my profession conventionally, in the classic way. And when you drive over the field with chemical fertilizer for the 10th time, you wonder whether that can really be good, especially when it comes to insecticides. That was a real initial spark for me.
Organic farmer Hatzel also receives money from the EU. 55,000 euros annually for his cultivation area and another 50,000 euros extra from Bavaria as a special organic premium. But unlike conventional large-scale farming, the money here is used for agriculture, which most citizens like, because it protects the landscape, the soil and the climate. There are only two viable business models in EU-funded agriculture: huge conventional farms such as Bördegrün or organic farming such as Hatzelhof. Since 1960, the number of farms has decreased by 80%, from 1.5 million to around 300,000. Small conventional farms are threatened with extinction. The EU's Common Agricultural Policy has been in existence since 1957, when the aim was to produce sufficient food for a growing population. Today, Europe's farmers should be competitive on the world market, but this will only work with billions in subsidies. Around 38% of the EU budget, 58 billion euros per year, go to agriculture. Of which 6.3 billion euros go to Germany. These will be split up. 5 billion go to the so-called first pillar as pure area payments per hectare. The second pillar mainly supports rural areas. Only a small part of the payments is directly linked to environmental measures such as the planting of green areas. EU agricultural policy rewards size. If you have a lot, you get a lot. Beneficiaries of the first pillar are farmers like Jülich with their huge agricultural areas. Small farms are not profitable. Today, half of Europe's agricultural land is owned by just 3% of farms. The EU primarily promotes yield maximization because of cheap competition on the world market. On the other hand, considerably less money is provided for organic farming. The consequences can be seen on fields like these: quiet, empty landscapes, a hostile space. Weed killers like glyphosate turn fields into red-brown deserts. Is the gap the EU's common agricultural policy responsible for the extinction of insects, birds and other species? A visit to the Münsterland in Germany. Employees of the Nature and Biodiversity Conservation Union are looking for the first lapwings that come here again from the south to breed. Since the 1990s, their numbers have dropped by almost 90%. For Christian Lilje, the farm birds are symbolic of our misguided approach to nature.
In my opinion, our fate as humanity is much more closely connected with the fate of lapwings than we would like it to be, because it only shows that ecosystems are becoming more and more unstable. And the lapwing is simply a very visible indication that everything is becoming less and less.
Lapwings like to breed in the fields, but about 3/4 of their nests are destroyed every year by intensive agriculture. To ensure that the farmers take consideration here, the men mark the breeding places. They will hardly be able to save the population as a whole with such measures, because the birds simply lack their food bases, insects and their larvae.
If GAP sticks to business as usual, if nothing fundamentally changes, then we will not stop insect mortality. Then we will lose the lapwing from our landscape. But then we will also end up facing farmers with court rulings, with bans and with regulations. Agriculture will then be driven against the wall, and we will ultimately have a catastrophic situation for both nature and agriculture.
Intensive agriculture also plays a major role in climate change, accounting for 14%. That is what the Federal Environment Agency, Germany's most important environmental authority, says. It calls for the rejection of a principle that has existed for decades.
EU agricultural policy doesn't sufficiently promote environmentally friendly behavior. Our recommendation is that the farmers which do most for the environment and nature conservation should get the most money through EU agricultural subsidies, and the farmers who cultivate the most land should no longer receive the most money.
It's a big idea. Spend public money on projects that are becoming increasingly important for Europe's citizens. Climate protection, species protection, conservation of natural resources. Progressing here would be an opportunity for the German Farmers Association to underline its role for the common good. 90% of all German farmers are organized in it. June 2018, German Farmers' Day in Wiesbaden. 700 farmers' officials discussed the most pressing issues. Also, the distribution of the EU billions. But a glance at the agenda shows that environmental protection is hardly discussed here. Instead, they absolutely want to stick to the EU area payments. In her speech, Agriculture Minister Julia Klöckner emphasizes that the money from the GAP is well invested. She was not available for an interview for this film, officially due to time constraints.
Those who believe that with regard to the question of insect mortality, environmental protection and climate protection, only agriculture is to blame for everything, are too lazy to make their own contribution so that we can continue to develop together.
By virtue of her office, the Minister of Agriculture is responsible for the common good. But her closeness to the farmers' officials is more likely to lead to a different conclusion.
I'm fighting for you. I know how you feel and I also know what you achieve.
She can be sure of the applause of the functionaries. Everything should remain the way it is for the farmers. But why are the farmers' representatives so vehemently opposed to a reorientation of the common agricultural policy? The advertising boards of the Farmers' Day sponsors give first indications. Who's interwoven with whom in German agriculture? A new study by the Institute for Work and Economics at the University of Bremen, on behalf of the German Society for Nature Conservation, is investigating this question. It deals with the connections between the officials of the German Farmers Association and politicians, with companies from the agro industry as well as other companies that are close to agriculture. for example, from the food and finance industry as well as the chemical industry.
These are the big players here: BASF, Bayer Crop Science, Syngenta, etc.
The scientists have uncovered a total of 560 connecting lines.
There are plenty of opportunities to exchange ideas.
The study names 75 companies, associations and even parties. The focus is on a particularly powerful player.
This spider in the web in the network is the German Farmers Association.
The scientists revealed that the functionaries and the management team apparently don't only represent the interests of the farmers. One example is President Joachim Ruckwied. For him alone, the study lists 18 positions and management levels of the agricultural industry.
Here we have shown what Mr. Ruckwied's most important positions are in individual areas. Here, for example, supervisory board member at the large R&V insurance, or in the banking industry, at the agricultural Rentenbank, the bank with the interest to granting loans, etc. Then we have the whole area of agriculture and the food industry, like the position on the supervisory board of BayWa, which of course has an interest in selling as many resources as possible, like fertilizers and pesticides to agriculture. Mr. Ruckwied wears various hats, and of course we can't tell when and how he represents which interest.
The other members of the Farmers' Union also hold top positions in companies close to agriculture. These men represent institutions that earn from farmers. This also applies to the General Secretary of the Farmers' Union. But Bernhard Krüsken sees no conflict of interest.
These are all companies owned by farmers, and that's important. Because if agriculture withdraws to the role of a raw material supplier, we believe it will lose relatively quickly. And the companies you just mentioned are all companies where the owners are farmers. This is the classic cooperative model, even if one or the other operates in the legal form of a stock company.
But most of these companies are market leaders in their sector, generate billions in sales, and are by no means only interested in the well-being of farmers. Only a small circle of farmers' officials obviously profits. Not only do they earn within, but also from agriculture, with machines, animal feed, pesticides, and much more. Demanded by thousands of farmers, ultimately financed from EU subsidies. A system that the profiteers want to preserve by all means.
For decades, the German Farmers' Union has managed to build up a network structure, very professional structures in order to exert a corresponding influence on the decision-making process both in politics and in the opinion-forming process in society.
The EU's agricultural policy can hardly be reformed with the Farmers' Union. But what about Brussels, the European Parliament? On this day, the EU Committee on Agriculture is to vote on a proposal from the Commission. Area payments are to be reduced. That would be a disaster for large farms. Would it not then be possible to invest the saved money in measures for more environmental and climate protection? Many hope so. The EVP has a majority in the Agriculture Committee, a coalition of conservative parties, including the CDU-CSU. Albert Dess has been the EVP spokesman in the Committee on Agriculture for 10 years. The CSU politician is considered the most powerful man there. At the same time, he is chairman of the board of the Bayernland AG in Bavaria, one of the largest dairies in Germany. A company that wants to buy milk from farmers as cheap as possible. Isn't there a conflict?
To call me a lobbyist is a vicious allegation. My population has known me in the district of Neumarkt since my youth. I had the best election results in all of Bavaria. In 2004, when I ran for the European Parliament for the first time, there were over 30 parties on the list. I got 70.1% for my party. People who know me would all reject such insinuations.
Of course, Dess has also been active in the German Farmers' Union for over 40 years. On top of that, he is now also a member of the Special Committee for the Approval of Plant Protection Products. Finally, he is a member of the advisory board of BayWa, Germany's largest agricultural trading company with a turnover of 16 billion euros. Their range also includes pesticides. His position on insect mortality is hardly surprising.
Agriculture in my community today is no different than it was 40 years ago. Why should it now be responsible for insect mortality?
But there are many pesticides to blame.
Wait a minute. 40 years ago, we had 70% pesticides with a skull on them. We no longer have them. 40 years ago, we had much worse pesticides, and that didn't bother the insects. The discussion is hypocritical.
But he should know better. A large number of studies have shown that agriculture has been using extremely effective pesticides for many years and has a significant share of insect mortality. Just a few minutes before the vote, Albert Dess and his EVP group will reject the Commission proposals. The threat of a stop of direct payments is off the cards for the time being. There will therefore be no new common agricultural policy before the European elections. Dess can be satisfied with the result, and above all, with himself.
I always said that I wouldn't exchange this position of being the spokesman for the largest group with any of the 28 agriculture ministers, because I have more influence here than a national agriculture minister. Without wanting to devalue it, national agriculture ministers have different tasks, but here I always have discussion partners from Europe, from all over the world. In my office were the ministers of agriculture from Britain, the United States, Brazil, New Zealand, Australia and Africa. My discussion partners were from all over the world.
A world that will continue to be supplied with subsidized European agricultural products. Maria Neuchel, a German Social Democrats agriculture expert in Brussels, calls for a radical restructuring of EU agricultural policy.
Where does it say that the world market must be our first market? I'm not against trade, nor am I against exporting anything to the outside world. But I stand for an agriculture that makes it very clear. Our first playing field is Europe, is regionality, and I would see Europe as regionality. It is absurd for us to ship milk to Australia and for Australian milk to be shipped to us. Both are dumped on the world market. The Australian farmers are no longer earning, the Germans are no longer earning, and everyone is surprised. Staple foods must not be driven around the world.
A sick system supported by billions in subsidies. Every cent of it is tax money from EU citizens, from all of us. Can consumers influence this system, for example, with their shopping? Ursula Hudson, president of the Slow Food Association, has dealt with this question. She bought products from conventional agriculture and knows what's behind it.
This flour, which is very, very cheap, has of course hidden costs in the background, which we all pay. The costs when soils, for example, slowly become infertile due to excessive fertilization. If there are too many pesticides in it. So we all pay somewhere for this cheap price of food in our supermarkets and discounters.
Second example, pork. It's cheap, also because the concentrated feed for the animals is cheap. The reason, it mainly comes from fields subsidized with EU billions.
In the large fattening farm that gives us such cheap meat like this one, there's actually only one type of pig that can be fed up to 120 to 150 kilos in a very short time. Again, using a lot of concentrated feed, but also completely ignoring species-appropriate animal husbandry.
Ursula Hudson's conclusion, often without knowing it, we consumers support a misdirected agricultural industry with our purchasing, to the detriment of the general public and the environment.
Consumers alone can't solve the problem due to the policy decisions of the last decades.
So it has to be solved by the politicians somehow. Berlin. A possible reform of the EU's agricultural policy will be decided not only by the politicians in Brussels, but ultimately by the national governments. The German Bundestag also has an agricultural committee. Renate Künast is part of it. From 2001 to 2005, she was Germany's only Green Minister for Agriculture and knows the priorities of her colleagues.
As always, the pressing issues facing the agricultural industry are being discussed particularly intensively by one part of the committee. Those are the people who always say, "we as farmers," and who calculate this individually on the basis of business management. They don't say, "I as an MP."
And indeed, 85% of the members of the Committee on Agriculture alone have a farm, are with the Farmers' Union, or even hold an important position there. In the committee, they have the power to block reforms. Renate Künast warns personal interests should not override public interest, no matter in which agricultural committee. She calls for a new system for the distribution of EU subsidies.
One that actually follows the principle of public money for public services, that a very large part of it, at least 15 billion euros, is actually turned into a nature conservation fund, and then the farmers are financed for clear nature measures. This is in the public interest. It is necessary because of the loss of biodiversity, because of the climate crisis. We have to pay farmers for this, for conversion and restructuring. Organic farming must be highly rewarded and not, so to speak, the overexploitation of nature.
Renate Künast is, however, quite alone in the committee with these ideas. The majority of the committee does not want to shake up the main pillar of EU subsidies, direct payments depending on crop area. Here too, the same situation as in Brussels. For the majority, economic interests obviously take precedence over measures to protect people from the consequences of climate change and species extinction. Back to the study of the Institute Arbeit und Wirtschaft, Work and Economy. The scientists have analyzed the lobby network of the German Farmers Association down to the tiniest ramification.
Die Zielsetzung unserer Studie war, dass wir herausfinden.
The aim of our study was to find out why the most varied reforms, the need for adaptation, cannot be implemented in European and German agricultural policy. Are there any political influences, lobbying?
An politischen Einflüssen, an Lobbyismus.
The researchers also came across the amazing power of a little-known organization, the Forum Moderne Landwirtschaft, Modern Agriculture, or FML for short. The forum's internet presence is solid and harmless. It provides information about agriculture in glossy pictures, not a word about environmental problems, factory farming, and extinction of species. Instead, for example, an article justifying the use of glyphosate. One of the initiators of the FML is the Farmers' Union.
The forum has nothing to do with politics, but the forum is a foundation of different players from agriculture with the aim to inform.
The heads of the Modern Agricultural Forum are top managers, for example in agrochemistry, which earns from the sale of glyphosate and other pesticides. Or from the Raiffeisenverband, with former agricultural politicians who are close to the Farmers Association. So much prominence just for a little information?
We assume that it's a bit more than that, namely an attempt to coordinate, to clarify political positions, and then to act in the direction of politics.
At the head of the forum is the Farmers Association's president Joachim Ruckwied. On the advisory board, the head of the Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, responsible for the approval of pesticides. Industry lobbyists and representatives of state authorities in a cozy community. For decades, a misguided policy has created vast agricultural deserts. And yet they still exist, islands of biodiversity with smaller fields, interrupted by hedges and forests, where agriculture is respectful of the environment, of insects and of other animals. Such an area can be found around the eco-village Brodowin, north of Berlin. With 1,400 hectares, it is the largest organic farm in Germany. Here they work according to the strict Demeter principles. The feed for the cows must be 100% organic, half of it from their own cultivation. The idea is to keep everything in one cycle to protect the environment.
We grow something on the field, we harvest it, and in this plant which we harvested, there is naturally energy. The nutrient of the soil is in it. This plant, which we partially process, for example, we sell the grain to bake bread, but a large part is eaten by our animals. The animals produce manure. We get the compost and take it back to the fields.
An over-fertilization with liquid manure, as in conventional agriculture, is excluded in this cycle economy. This farm also receives area payments from the EU, just like all farms. The crop losses typical of organic farming cannot, however, be compensated for by these funds. This can only be achieved by direct marketing and the higher price of organic food. The eco-village proves that organic farming also works on a large scale and has a future.
I don't blame any farmer for what's happened so far, because we've been trained for it. We are doing exactly what was expected of us. We've reduced costs and rationalized. Conventional agriculture in particular. And here in Broddowien, we've simply experienced that there are other possibilities, other ways, and that it can be incredibly exciting as a farmer to do more than produce.
More subsidies from Europe for the protection of the environment would obviously be well invested here, for an agriculture that feeds people and preserves their livelihoods. Global warming is changing our world with ever-increasing speed. But a new movement is putting up resistance, with money.
In a certain way, investors determine what happens in the world.
Influential millionaires of the next generation plan to put the world of business and finance on a green footing.
Time is running out. We have to act.
For years, conservation has been seen as a yield killer. So are powerful shareholders now finding their green compass?
The world is changing, not slightly but massively, and we have to be prepared.
Zurich, the city of money. There are more private fortunes kept here than anywhere else on Earth. This is the secret world of the super-rich.
Most people underestimate how great the concentration of private assets here is. Today, for example, the 45 wealthiest families in Germany control roughly as much capital as the poorer half of the population. And the global situation is similar. There are roughly 32 million millionaires on our planet and around 2,000 billionaire families. Naturally, these billionaire families wield enormous power, especially through their companies, but also through their capital. But here, we are actually talking not about billions, but about trillions. So that is our starting point.
At Zurich University, Falco Petzold is studying what influence money has on climate change. As a former investment banker for many years now, he has been making use of his access to the world of the super-rich. This is a special kind of workshop. The people around this table are worth a fortune. They are young, wear Bermuda shirts, and want to change the world.
What is the most effective tool to move the trillions? Yeah.
Some of the workshop participants come from very wealthy families and have inherited vast fortunes. Together, they wield tremendous influence. Falco Petzold wants them to become active. His aim is to see the rich engage in more sustainable investment.
It's super simple. It's going to be like, so I understand what I do with my money has impact in the world, and I'm pledging herewith to take this serious.
Petzold gathers data no other researcher could ever have collected. From confidential interviews, he has learned that many of the super-rich want sustainability. They just don't know how to go about it.
It's essential, I feel, to understand the background to why we are a university unit. We need research. How can sustainable investments really be scaled and geared to changing the world? That's why we need research. Secondly, of course, it is important to convey this to those who can effectively take investment decisions. So we don't just stick with research. We also offer training programs and workshops for people we believe could give us particularly big leverage.
One such person is Antonis Schwarz. He comes from a wealthy family in Germany. His motto is, combat climate change with cash.
Our goal is to create a sustainable civilization. So we must change our growth-driven lifestyle, which is focused heavily on consumption. What is the point, we must ask ourselves, of having so much money, which at some point will be worthless, when we are living on a planet which is actually sinking into total chaos?
Total im Chaos versinkt eigentlich.
A millionaire is stepping out of the shadows, with a superhero as his role model.
I found Batman exciting because he leads this double life. To a certain extent, in the past, I also lived a double life. In fact, far more than I do now. I'm now dealing more openly with the issue of personal assets because I want to inspire others to move in this direction.
Schwarz wants to make the economy more social and more ecological with specific investments. He wants to become active and make society sit up and take notice. That's why the 32-year-old also supports protests with his money.
One of our greatest successes last year was Extinction Rebellion. There are also Extinction Rebellion groups in Germany who are embarking on their first campaigns. In Britain, there were several thousand people who were ready to engage in massive civil disobedience and get arrested. A tactic copied from Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Being arrested seems to be one of the most effective methods of bringing about social change.
Millennials, those born in the 1980s, form a new class of investors. Their focus is not only on yield, but also on having a positive effect on the world.
My generation still has this storm and stress mentality. It is probably part of being young. We still have the fervor to combat injustice, and I find it is also a purifying process, which every generation somehow passes through. Young people simply protest against the system, because in my eyes, although we have achieved a great deal with our standard of living, but this has been at the cost of others or the environment, and that just has to be put on the table.
Schwarz not only invests his own assets, he also seeks other sources of money, especially for the fight against climate change. And he's not alone. Ethical investments is a concept pursued by the Anglican churches. The idea is to do God's work while administering wealth.
Well, I think at the heart of it is that we're a pension fund, we have to provide a pension for 38,000 beneficiaries, but we recognise there's some real fundamental challenges to our ability to do that. And one of those challenges is climate change, equally how companies interact with the environment.
The Church of England is the fourth richest church on earth. Adam Matthews administers its pension fund. This church manager holds several billion pounds in shares, including shares in threats to the world's climate.
The Brumadinho Dam collapse, where you've got over 270 people having been killed. I looked on the news to saw the stories coming through on the internet. When that happened, it was just very clear that we needed to mobilise asset owners and investment managers to say, right, something has to change. This issue and this disaster will change mining forever as a result of the work that's going on at the moment.
After the lethal dam catastrophe, Adam Matthews put the church's shares in the company responsible on the market. The share price collapsed, but the Brazilian concern was not forced to rethink because the shares were bought up again by new investors. Now the church is looking to tread different paths.
For me, disinvesting is almost a failure because you've not been able to get the change you want. And there is an opportunity on many issues to exercise that influence from the shareholder base.
Adam Matthews has changed his strategy. Together with other major investors, he now wants to exert pressure. The Church of England is doing this through transparency. It's making public how companies are behaving in a way that harms the environment. To this end, it has even established its own databank.
101, and that is just like not even acknowledging climate change. And these are the largest coal producers in the world. You can see that people are going to start differentiating very significantly within sectors around how they're going to invest.
Adam Matthews has noticed that investors are slowly rethinking. Climate change is becoming an investment risk.
You're seeing much more collective interventions by shareholders. The ones that we make, we fundamentally recognise individually we will achieve very little through engagement just by ourselves. So everything we do is steered towards a sort of collaborative approach where you can mobilise those trillions.
Matthews is preparing a meeting with oil giant Shell. He wants the concern to become more environment friendly. Early morning in the port of Tromsø, in the far north of Norway. A special investment project is casting off. The Brim, an electric-powered vessel, is bound for the Arctic Circle. The passengers on board are expecting a natural spectacle in the eternal ice. On board for the first time is investor Tarald Nustad. A millionaire, he plans to change fossil industries through technology and financing innovations which have a positive influence on the environment.
We invest in Brim because we think it's very important to have the transition from fossil fuel in the shipping and boat industry to electric and hybrid, and both because the pollution is a big problem.
Every year, the shipping industry emits more than 2% of the worldwide volume of greenhouse gases. That's as much as the whole of Germany. Icelander Agnes Anatoldia wants to change that with the help of Nustad's investment. With environment-friendly electric propulsion and as little marine diesel oil as possible.
This movement is necessary. Like the industry has been moving a little bit, politicians have been moving a little bit for the last years, but the big mover is the one sitting on the money. So basically, if we are to get a real chance, those who place the money, they are those who can make the change the fastest.
Everything on board the Brim is geared to sustainability. Built with recycled materials, the Brim forges its way through the stormy seas. Anna Dottir and Nustad are convinced that the future of the travel industry is green. The ship's power unit consists of 10 Tesla batteries. This means 90% of the vessel's excursions do not consume any diesel oil, so the ship sails silently and emission-free through the icy waves.
Research has shown quite recently that noise pollution is a big problem for animals in the ocean. Both the whales are dependent on hearing each other and to be able to communicate. Both to find mates or just in general communicate in order to hunt together. Both orcas and humpback whales, which we often see here, are very dependent on it.
A newcomer, the brim has quickly aroused the interests of other investors. One major shipping company wants to work with Anotodie on sustainable technologies. The sponsor is more than happy.
Because it's a great project, it's a physical project that you can touch and feel and see that there's real progress going on. It's actually doing something positive, changing the tourism industry to a more sustainable way, and it's a great experience.
For the Norwegian, sustainable tourism is only one building block. If climate collapse is to be prevented, capital has to become green. Nustad's ally, Antonis Schwarz, is in search of green sources of money. He has come to London to meet with representatives from industry and politics. It's about dormant assets which the British have been using for sustainable purposes for years. As yet, that doesn't happen in Germany. Here, up to 9 billion euros are lying dormant on bank accounts whose owners have either died or can no longer be found. Schwarz wants to use the money to set up a sustainability fund to promote green projects. The British are already using 300 million euros from dormant accounts. The concept pursued by government representatives has convinced Schwarz.
I have learned that it could also be possible in Germany. We have already spoken to banks. They would be happy, so to speak, to see the issue resolved, because these accounts are expensive for banks to maintain. And we want to create a win-win-win situation, one where the banks would get something out, and so would society. And thirdly, the state would bring its legislation up to international standard.
Schwarz still has to get politicians and banks in Germany on his side, but his fight for a better world continues. A world in which the blue off Norway's coasts remains unaffected by overfishing and pollution. The ocean is the biggest source of revenue for this proud nation of seafarers, but the maritime industry is too lethargic to protect it adequately. So startup firms in Oslo are searching for solutions to marine problems, like experimenting with underwater traps for responsible fishing. The founders of startup businesses need capital. Investor Tarald Nustad is trying to save the world and at the same time do business.
The goal is we're looking for the best founders that focus on solving problems as a core of their business, using technology to scale that and making a huge positive impact on the world at the same time as making great profits financially.
Nustad inherited a Norwegian real estate empire. He wants to prove to the classical world of finance that conservation is not the enemy of yield. Together with business partner Maren Hjort Bauer, he has big plans with the selected startups he backs.
And our vision is a world where we have a thriving ocean in harmony with economic development. And that means that we can use the ocean to solve some of the challenges we have. We can also solve the challenges at the same time as building great, profitable businesses.
A catapult for green business ideas. The selected startups are coached by mentors from finance and industry. The aim is for them to grow and affect change throughout the economy.
We see that, we're doing this in the startup space, but we see that all business will have to move this way to be both sustainable but also profitable in a way. So we see that there's more and more interest now from the bigger financial players, the banks, the asset managers, and more of them are starting to look into sustainable investing and impact investing, and we think that's a trend that's going to escalate.
Is the world of finance finding its green compass? Nustad and Bauer want to use their influential network of industrialists and bankers for their projects. Like lobbyists, they want to link the new with the established world of industry and bring young problem solvers together with old sponsors.
Now we have more technology to really we can map the plastic the plastic in the ocean. We can map and understand how much fish are actually overfished and the current state of the ocean. We can understand, and we can also communicate in a much better way than previously. So it's this awareness that technology enables us to have. And then I think also it's something about new generations coming that have maybe a more luxury of thinking about these problems as well than maybe our parents or our grandparents that lived in the Second World War.
Solving urgent problems and earning money from it. That's the approach here. But when will the entire capital market finally switch to green? Only when it's clear to everyone, Falco Petzold says, that it will be profitable.
People think that if they include sustainability issues in their investments, they will automatically lose money, but that's a fallacy. In real terms, you lose money if you do not include in your investments all information that is relevant to the future. And what issues are relevant today? First, there is climate change, then resource depletion and social stability. These are issues which basically drive an economy and determine the value of financial investments. And anyone who fails to use this information is simply a bad investor. But this still hasn't quite got through to the world of finance.
Here at the headquarters of a German asset management firm in downtown Munich, billions are moved. Yields this year, so we hear from the conversation, stand at 27%. Thomas Kurz heads the 270 billion euro investment arm of Munich Re, the world's biggest reinsurer. He has focused on sustainable financial investments for many years now.
Back then, we set up two special funds, MEAG Sustainability, an international share fund, and MEAG Climate Change, a fund which invested in solar panels and solar parks. At the time, no one was interested. It was many, many years before the MEAG Sustainability Share Fund was even taken seriously on the market. And we even had to close the MEAG Climate Strategy Fund. No one bought it. But today, MEAG Sustainability is one of our most successful products. It has a considerable growth rate. Our attitude has also changed. Back then, we were visionaries and missionaries. Today, sustainability is reality.
A new study shows that through climate risks, the world's biggest companies are in danger of losing up to €1 trillion. Investor Thomas Kurz has noticed a rethinking process in the market.
Each of these bars shows a study, and in each of these studies, the same question was asked. Is sustainability good or bad for yields? In 2007, every investment in a solar or wind farm was a risk. But as you can see here, from 2016 and 2017, everything started to change. Investors began to answer differently. Now sustainability is seen as good for yields.
The success of a wind farm investment, for instance, depends considerably on future weather risks. That's why investment managers meet regularly with their own climate experts. Nature is growing into the world of finance.
If people invest today in climate protection measures, in other words, in the conversion of energy technologies towards fewer emissions over a long period, over the next few decades, this will prove profitable.
The world is changing, not slightly but massively, and we have to be prepared.
The wind is changing. But what's behind it all? Is the world of finance feeling the pressure from society? In Bonn, globalization expert Josef Radermacher is talking to young climate protectors. He's convinced that anyone who has lots of money has a lot to lose.
If my freedom consists of taking 100 flights a year and zooming off to 7 marathons around the world, then that can be a wonderful form of freedom. Should that no longer be permitted one day, it'll be all over with the marathons. So, if I am rich, I need to make sure that I prevent this catastrophe, simply because of my own freedom. And the top emitters should make sure that they make their companies climate neutral. At the moment, that is happening on a grand scale.
Like here on the 17th floor of a major bank in London. Churchman Adam Matthews has gathered together members of the world's investment elite. Now it's all about overcoming old ways of thinking.
Leads me to conclude that some companies are actually putting more efforts into lobbying or trying to postpone the inevitable than actually in investing to transform themselves.
Adam Matthews is sitting next to the deputy chairman of Shell. He and his allies want to confront the oil manager with hard facts.
Today's been about basically understanding which oil and gas companies, which mining companies and which electric utility companies are genuinely starting to transition their businesses and which aren't, so that we've got clarity as investors about where we need to focus our attention and use our levers of change with those companies that aren't progressing fast enough.
Adam Matthews' best weapon against climate offenders is probably the solidarity with other investors. Stephanie Pfeiffer heads one of the biggest alliances for a climate-neutral economy.
I think it's the right thing for them to do.
Well, I think what makes it so powerful is the weight of the investors behind it. You've got 360, 370 investors with $34 trillion in assets, engaging with the highest emitting companies globally. At CEO level, it is being taken very seriously, and it has been accepted that we all need to act.
Investors fear that if the oil giants don't become climate neutral quickly enough and industries are penalized, their assets will shrink. Sticking closely together, the shareholders won the first round of talks. The bosses from Shell buckled. In future, their remuneration will also be linked to specific CO2 levels being reached.
This is one of the largest oil and gas companies in the world. Through this process, we were able to negotiate the first ever statement between investors and an oil and gas company. But the question is that change sufficient from the level of the challenge that we're dealing with? And I think that's where there's still a lot of work to be done.
Time is running short, above all for the next generation. It's demanding extensive changes to the global world of business. But sustainability researcher Josef Rademacher warns against taking steps that are too radical.
Creating this market system is one of mankind's greatest achievements. It produces all these goods and services like some incredible machine. We cannot allow this machine to stop running. Whatever we change about this machine will be tantamount to open-heart surgery. This machine must continue to run while we are changing it.
If the climate and wealth are to be saved, old industries must also be able to change direction without going under. In this respect, investors play a key role.
Investors must understand that in capitalism, what happens in society depends to huge extent on decisions taken by investors. And we are the investors. We must take an active interest in what is done with our money and know precisely what happens to our investment in major companies. How can we influence these concerns? That is what people must focus on. And if they do this, then in a way that does justice to the importance of the issue.
This is something which interests the super-rich worldwide. Here in Zurich, Falco Petzold has brought many of them together again. His sustainable investment approach is also welcomed by this millionaire from Brazil.
So what we decided to do is really talk to this specific audience of the heirs to create a community where we can have a peer exchange and also education on how we can maximize our impact throughout all of our portfolio.
It's not only wealthy individuals who are switching to green. Now they are also forming new networks. Whether they're scientists, the super-rich or children on strike, the younger generation in particular wants to push ahead with change.
My main motivation is because I want to create a world where we all can be thriving, happy people. And that's what I believe as a tech nerd. We stand in front of a crossroad. Either it's going to hell or it's going to utopia. And we can influence that choice. And I want to go towards the positive instead of the negative.
The green money revolution has begun. Some have put climate protection on their agenda already. But this is still only the start.